Goedemorgen. Good morning, people of Laracon. Great to meet you here. And when I meet people in Amsterdam, one of the questions I get the most, they ask me is, where you're from? So that's what I'm going to ask you today. Raise your hand if you're from the Netherlands. Cool, looks like it's about 50% of people. If you're not from the Netherlands, raise your hand. Wow, that's like 100%. I don't know how that came about, but that's super cool. Are there anyone from Americas? North and South America, US, Canada? Okay, I see a few hands. Are there anyone from Africa? I think I talked to a speaker that was from Africa. Anyone from Asia? Okay, I see a few hands. Hi. Anyone from Oceania? Okay, cool. Oceania is one person. So as Shen mentioned, there are 30 nationalities representing at Laracon today, and there are people from different continents. That kind of makes all of you like a little global village representing different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences. Now imagine if somebody were to design a product or service for all of us. We think differently, we behave differently, and we react differently to different product, different user interfaces. What about the world? Even so. So that's what I'm going to explore today about how cultural differences affect UX and UI and how to actually design and develop for that. All right, okay. My name is Shen. I specialize in designing inclusive product experiences for diverse users. I'm an independent consultant, but I'm also a member of TapTal, which is a global distributed talent network. And in my spare time, I volunteer at Ladies at UX, a global nonprofit organization which is aiming to promote diverse voices in user experiences. And my background is that I was born in Taiwan, and my family moved to Canada when I was 12 years old. And since 2011, I have a history of moving abroad, living in different countries, from India, Singapore, the US, and now I'm based in the Netherlands since 2015. And because of my passion of traveling and living in different countries, I have the opportunity to work with clients from around the world for users around the world. Now, before we can talk about culture differences, we first have to understand what is culture. Geert Hofstede, he researched and he summarized culture in 6 different dimensions, from power distance, masculinity, femininity, individualism, and uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And for example, this is how the Netherlands compared to my country, Taiwan. And there's like different differences, and we will discuss it a bit more later in the talk. And Erin Mayer, she did research on how different cultures approach doing businesses. And this is her findings.
You might be a star negotiator in your own country, but in today's global economy, your skills may not automatically translate to other cultures. For instance, in some cultures, it's entirely appropriate to show emotion during a negotiation, to raise your voice, laugh passionately, or even put a friendly arm around your counterpart. In others, this much expression not only feels intrusive or surprising, but may be viewed as immature or unprofessional. Then there's open disagreement. Negotiators often assume that more expressive cultures are also more confrontational, but that isn't always the case. In some countries, such as France and Israel, emotions pour out, including disagreement. But for other very expressive cultures, such as Brazil, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia, open disagreement could be seen as insulting. Some less expressive cultures, such as Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, see open disagreement and debate as positive and necessary, as long as it's expressed calmly and factually. Others tend to be both less emotional and non-confrontational, which means you'll have to be especially attuned to subtle cues for both positive and negative responses. It's also important to learn how others build trust. There are two distinct types, cognitive and affective, and in a business setting, the dominant type of trust varies from one culture to another. Cognitive trust is task-based. It comes from the head and is built on your counterpart's accomplishments, skills, and reliability. American culture offers a good example of this kind of trust. In the United States, getting too emotionally close to a business counterpart is seen as unprofessional, and mixing the personal and professional is seen as risky. Affective trust is relationship-based and comes from the heart. It arises from the feelings of emotional closeness, empathy, and friendship that are developed gradually through sharing meals, evening drinks, and coffee breaks. In China, for instance, negotiators are unlikely to trust their counterparts until an effective connection has been made. Adapting your negotiation approach accordingly will help you get to yes, or si, ja, oui, hi, and da.
So we just learned that there are many different ways that culture differences can appear. And we learned, for example, according to her, Dutch people are confrontational and they are not expressive, and some cultures are expressive. So how does it actually relate to what we do? And what does it mean for us who design and develop for products? The reason why we should consider culture differences, according to Jacob Nielsen and Elisa de Galdo, it is not enough to just translate your product into different languages. Users actually expect and want a product that acknowledges their unique cultural characteristic and also the local business practices. So if they already said that, then it's not enough to just do the translation. We must do the localization, we must do the internationalization. So I'd like to share some strategies of how I approach designing for users of different cultures. The first way is that you have to research the local culture, of course. I've been based in the Netherlands for about 3 years now, and I learned a ton about the Dutch culture, and I didn't expect there would be such even culture differences between Canada and the Netherlands, because when I moved here, I actually thought, Western country, like how different can that be? According to Hofstede, the Dutch culture is according to these dimensions, with high in individualism, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And particularly, in his research, he summarizes for each culture what are some characteristics. And for Dutch people, these are the characteristics that's mentioned in the summary. So they are pragmatic. They know the leanest way, the quickest way to solve a problem. They are thrifty so that they can save and prepare for the future. And of course, they have a propensity to save. When I worked at Travelbird, this is one of my first projects I ever worked on. So this is a form to ask the passenger, ask the traveler for their booking transport information, so that Travelbird is an online travel agency and we need to book them the flight or we need to book them the package. So in this form, they ask for the user's names and passport details. And the problem here I'm trying to solve is this part, is that users were not filling in their correct last names or maiden names. They were not filling in the correct information. So we thought maybe the warning is not obvious enough, it's not big enough. So I made an icon, I made the text bold, I wrote a warning message which wrote, make sure the name in your passport matches, make sure the name in the form matches the name in your passport. If it's not correct, you could be refused at the gate. So I thought the warning now looked pretty obvious and it sounds pretty serious, and surely user must comply by the rules. So we rolled out this design and we tested it, and I was actually surprised to find out this does not work at all. Users were still filling in their nicknames, they were filling in their initial, they were filling anything but the name in the passport. So I went to actually look at some competitor references. I look at how other airlines are doing this for our Dutch travelers. This is the flight data form for Transavia, which is a Dutch airline. So here you can see that there's a big form about please filling in all passenger details as in your passport or identity card. And you see the highlight here. If the name is not correct, you could pay up to 50 euros if you want to change your name. So later I learned this probably will work better for the Dutch users if we actually highlight the penalty or highlight the consequences of not going to filling in their passport names. And also I learned a lot about the Dutch neighbor, Germany. According to host data, the German culture is high in individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. And host data's description of German users is that they need systematic overview in order to proceed. And this is reflected by the law system and how detail-oriented and how systematic it is. So German users need details, they need certainty, and they need something to be explained in a very detailed way and very well thought out way. Let me show you an example. This is Travelbird's booking page, and this is the one for Dutch users. You can see ID over here. In this form, users just pick a date and they continue on payments and then finishing their travel booking. So this is the Dutch version, and this is the German version. Can you tell the difference between the two? Big difference. So the German version actually has a list of inclusive and exclusive, and there are also trust badges here on the bottom. The list of inclusive and exclusive tells the travel or the booker what is included in this travel package and what is not. Does it include airport transfer? Does it include luggage? Does it include breakfast? And does it not include other things like payment, including payments for children or whatnot? So when we design for e-commerce, it is more usual to assume that telling the users what is not included could lead them to second guess their choice and to think about, okay, it's actually a good deal. It does not include breakfast. It does not include checked luggage. And maybe I'll go back and shop other things. But actually, we tested the list of inclusive and exclusive. And we found that having this information, this detailed list of information, actually have helped German users to feel more confident in their decision because they know exactly this is what they're going to get and what they're not going to get. So that's one of the culture differences between Netherlands and Germany in at least a travel booking form. The second thing I learned in designing for users of different culture is that we must research and study the local UI patterns. Did you know that in China, instead of a hamburger menu, it's more common to see a Discover button on mobile apps. And Ding Gover is an ex-project manager at Tencent WeChat, and he studied quite a lot of Chinese apps to find out there is this pattern where you don't see any hamburger menu, but instead there is this icon with like a compass to tell the users, hey, click here, tap here for more options, more unrelated, more secondary options. And you can see that all over Tencent, Weibo, WeChat, and so on. So that's one way that perhaps like hamburger doesn't work in China. So they think of other ways that kind of make sense to the local users. Another East and West difference is Mozilla Firefox. This is the American homepage. This is the American version. As you can see, it's very clean. It's very simple. It has just text, take control, choose Firefox, and then a call to action. This is something like a landing page we're pretty accustomed to, right? Now, if you look at the version in China, you actually see some differences. You actually see a lot more stuff. You see ads and you see banners, and then it's just a lot going on. And in case you're wondering, this green button here is not to download. It actually means to post in the forum. So why is there a big interface difference between the US and China. Brent Pitoyo is a design strategist at Mozilla, and he went to research why. He looked at the most popular sites using both China and the US and did a comparison. So in this list, this is the highlighting the #1 site used in both China and the US. You can see that on the top, it's Google and Baidu, and which are kind of expected, and these are search engines optimized for searching with a really clean, minimal interface with one thing that the user can do. But if you look at the other sites that the users are using, you see like Yahoo, Sina, Sohu, where their interface look more like this. It looked more like newspaper, looked more like dashboard, with really just a ton of information, and that's really, to some of us, overwhelming. To some of us, it feels like a lot of information to digest, and who can actually read this? But Chinese users do. And Brent Pitoyo, his assumption for why there is a difference is according to the input methods. So his hypothesis is that typing Chinese takes a long time, and finding a precise word is not easy. Because for the same pronunciation, we can have hundreds of words that means the same thing. So instead of searching for the precise word, why don't we just allow the user to read what's on the page, and all they have to do is just click into what they find interesting. So that's perhaps one of the cultural differences and how they manifest in UX UI. And thirdly, when you're designing for users of different cultures, you definitely have to measure the data, use data-driven design. This is a client based in Holland, and Desk Bookers offers office and workspace rentals for companies and individuals. So they reach out because their site in Germany was not having such a good performance. They reached out for me to optimize their conversion for their Germany locale. So I looked at their website, and I also looked at their data, and I set up heat maps to actually look at where users are clicking and they're scrolling. And I was surprised to find that users first click on help and company-related links. They didn't fill in the city name, or if they are searching for an office space in Delft, in Rotterdam, they don't first do that. They first read about help and about. So I have two assumptions of why that is. So German users, perhaps due to lack of trust and due to ambiguity, they first need to learn more about a company to have more information to proceed. So lack of trust and also ambiguity. There's not a lot of details on the homepage for German users. So if a user doesn't trust the company, maybe that's why they are doing that. So I offer a few suggestions for my clients. So first, I have to add the trust logos, just like what you see in Travelbird and also a lot of the e-commerce sites in Germany. We also have to localize the website for German German users, with reviews, with German company logos, local acceptance payment methods, and also make the website less ambiguous by adding a company description in the footer. This is what the end result looked like after we adopted all of the design changes. So you can see there are reviews, the site looks more credible, there are trust badges, there are German company logos, reviews, acceptance payment methods, and also finally a address and also email that's specifically for the German users. So because of these content and design changes, we were successful at increasing the conversion rates for Germany. And now I walked you through a lot of examples of cultural differences, and I always like to share something more practical. So I will actually tell you how to actually conduct the local culture research. So then in your project, maybe you can, if your designer is not aware of the culture differences, you could be the one, if you're interested, to actually do research or guide your designer to research for the local culture. The first place I go to is host data country comparison. So if you just go to this URL, then you will find the graph, the charts, and also the culture summaries that I just talked about in the beginning of the presentation. So in here, you can even compare up to 3 countries because culture differences are relative. So you can compare your own country versus the country that you're designing for, and you can actually have a really extensive summary. This is based on interviewing and researching something like 2,000 IBM employees across the world, and that is his finding. So I would say it's pretty credible. The second place you can go to other than host data sites is do internet research. For example, you can find a lot of things on Wikipedia, you can find it on blogs, or you can find it on expat sites that aim to help foreigners integrate and move into the country. Like you can find, for people who are not living here, you can find a lot of stuff about Dutch people or Dutch culture on something like Amsterdam.com. Then sites like that for other countries can help you learn more about that particular country. And particularly, I want to highlight 3 things that you can probably find in these internet research: colloquial language, characteristic, and holidays and religion. So for colloquial language and slang, this is something that you can consider to adopt in your product. For example, this is Grab. This is Grab that's based in Indonesia and Malaysia and also Southeast Asia. And Grab, instead of when they offer a taxi option, they don't write the Western word taxi, T-A-X-I, but instead they use the Malay word taxi. It kind of brings the users more familiarity and also kind of more connectedness when they use the local language to try to make it a little bit more fun and make the users feel more connected. And also, for example, this is a marketing graphic in Singapore, and they use the local slang. It's called Singlish. So "Dai Dai must try" is a Singlish term, and actually just means that you must try it before you die. And when local users see this, they know what it means. It actually feels quite interesting. It feels more memorable. And using these local terms can help your users maybe get more attracted, or at least make your product or your services more memorable. The next is characteristic. So I lived in Singapore for about 1.5 years, and I also learned a lot about the Singapore culture. I learned a lot about Singlish, and one of the key characteristics, or at least more well-known, is that Singaporeans tend to be kiasu. Kiasu literally means the fear of losing. And Singaporeans are kiasu because this is from what I heard. They are actually told their country is great, and then they really want to become the best, and that's why Singapore government really invests a lot of development in the country, and people are very proud of their country. So Singaporean users tend to like competition. They tend to like prestige, and they tend to like scoring good deals, or at least feeling that they are beating people that they are kind of having an advantage over people who do not have a good deal. And this image here is showing the lineup for a store opening, and that's a bubble tea store opening. And bubble tea is very cheap in Asia, probably costs like €1, €1.50. And this store, when they were opening, they were giving out 100 free bubble tea. And this is the amount of people that line up for a €1.50 bubble tea. Because they want to score that good deal, they want to feel good that they are the ones who actually got in line. They were the first 100 people to get this free bubble tea. So when you see that the Singaporean users have these sort of characteristics, this is maybe something you can adapt in your product and service. For example, offering competitions, offering recognitions, offering also good deals can perhaps help you attract Singaporean users. The third thing from the internet research you can find is about holidays and religion. This is a graph showing different ethnicity and also different religion that's based in Singapore. And for us who live in the West, it's perhaps really easy to assume that many people are Christian or Catholics or agnostic or whichever. But in Singapore, the ethnic makeup is really diverse. And there are people who are Buddhists, people are Taoists, people who are Hindus, and the holidays in the country are also very diverse. So if today you are working on an e-commerce platform and you need to think about the holiday sales, make sure that you are considering the users who are celebrating different holidays, regional holidays, ethnic holidays, and don't just focus on one type of religion or one type of users. And about this is Uber's interface for Lunar New Year, which is a holiday that a lot of East Asians celebrate, from Malaysia to Vietnam to Taiwan, and even some Chinese ethnicity in Japan. So when Uber has this interface, we can actually order a lion dance, and this is to celebrate a year of rooster. This interesting piece of design help us be more connected to Uber, because we thought, wow, they actually thought about us. They actually care about our ethnicity. They acknowledge that we have this Lunar New Year, which is like everyone celebrates it with firecrackers and red pockets. So it makes the product memorable by offering this localized piece of product design to your users. Okay, so now that you have looked at host data and you have done your internal research, what else can you do? One kind of a hack that I personally recently discovered and I've used when I approach a localization project is I do informal interviews. So the project I recently had to work on is for a luxury fashion brand, and we were targeting Singaporean users. Even though I lived in Singapore for 1.5 years, I don't have that many friends to help me out because they are not luxury brand shoppers. And my boss tell me, we need to find 100 users, or as many as possible. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't know where to find these 100 users to talk to about luxury fashion shopping. So I was thinking like how I can actually do this, how I can actually find these users when they are based in a different country and I actually don't know them. So I had an idea. If I cannot talk to these users, or if I cannot find them that easily, why don't I talk to somebody that did? So I began to reach out to several senior designers, directors, managers of fashion companies based in Singapore, and I kind of have some confidence that they are doing their job, they are doing the user research, and they are talking to their users. So I mentioned this is for research and just like to understand some sort of verify my assumptions on the ways that Singapore luxury fashion brand design is the way it is. And during these informal interviews, I actually discovered an insight from a UX manager at a really large Singapore fashion platform. So she told me that shopping is a hobby for many Singaporeans. People buy just because something is on sale. So that kind of echoed the finding that I previously had about Singaporeans like to score good deals. So because they buy when something is on sale because there's nothing else to do in the country except shopping. So I thought that was quite interesting, and that kind of confirmed my previous insight. So therefore, we can be more confident in using stuff like leaderboards or stuff that kind of increase the will of competing against each other, and also offering a lot of good deals for our Singapore locale. Other than researching for culture, you also kind of have to do localization research. So here's a guide on step-by-step how to actually research the localization aspects for your interface. So you can do many things, but most importantly, you have to look for the UX UI patterns, and you can learn about the country and like the state of mobile, the state of whatever industry that you're in. And you can do that by competitor analysis, academic research, e-commerce reports, and white papers. So these are some of the methods that I have used when I was designing for users of a different culture. And one key thing here that I want to highlight is that when you do the research, make sure to research in a local language and not your own language, be it Dutch, German, English, and whatnot. So the lesson we learned, why I have this insight, is because when we were designing for users in Japan, also Taiwan, my colleague who I work with, diverse team, and the colleague I work with quite often, he is American. And we were actually needing to research about like the state of mobile shopping for Taiwan. And we both actually have to do the research, and he was telling me that he researched all these white papers, searched mobile behavior and whatnot. He told me that he couldn't find anything for Taiwan. So we assumed that, okay, perhaps there's not much research being done. We kind of have no data to rely on. But then I started thinking, wait, I guess he's probably researching in English. So I went ahead to research the terms in Chinese, and actually, to my surprise, we found so much information, and some of them were actually recent. So it just showed that all the research was done, but they were all done and written in Chinese. So therefore, my colleague couldn't find them when he typed the English terms. So if you need to research about localization and about the demographic country, make sure that you partner with somebody who can speak the language so that they can help you enter those terms and translate those reports. In addition, I will also want to talk about localization elements, and here I want to highlight 5 things in the talk. But there are actually more than these 8 different things that you have to consider in your product, in your software, if you are localizing. So the first thing is about names and addresses and all those localization elements. So when you're designing a name form, sign-up form and whatnot, make sure that your name acknowledges the local way of ordering the name elements. For example, Shen Nian is my Chinese name, and we have the last name before the first name. So that's actually a pretty easy thing to localize. But then you also have names with special characters, and they have like really unique different ways to label names and different orders with middle names and whatnot. Make sure that you research what those are and localize according to that. And also I want to highlight that you should probably allow special characters. Because one of my frustrations with the hyphen in my first name is that often when I'm booking flights or if I need to enter my name, I often cannot enter the hyphen. So I have to think like, okay, should I just remove the hyphen? Should I use a space instead? Like in the beginning, I was actually even nervous because what if I get in trouble because of removing the hyphen? Because that's technically not my name. And the same here is showing you many examples of special characters, hyphen, and apostrophe in the middle of names. And it's really frustrating for users who have these kind of names to keep on encountering errors. Sorry, not valid, try different, but like, this is my name. So now that I am voicing for the users on our frustrations when we have a special character in our name, so here I plead to all developers, please try to allow special characters in your validation. So we are not like pulling our hair when we are filling out name fields. Also, make sure to account for loan names in your localized name forms. Because some people's name can be very long, like the second example in the allow special characters. And not only you should allow inputting long names, whenever the name is displayed, for example, the order confirmation page or the on the top right in your dashboard, make sure there's enough space and there's no overlap, there's no cropping, there's no weird tiny sizes. Make sure to test for various use cases for when the username is long or short or with initials. There's one thing I want to say about names. Second localization element is the language. So I use Singapore as an example a lot because I lived there for a year and a half. And did you actually know that Singapore, English is one of the official languages? However, it is the UK spelling and not a US spelling. And there are also many other countries where English is one of the official languages, like India. And also other former British colonies, they all use UK English. So be sure to research what spelling it is, and also if you're targeting demographic that speak Chinese, make sure to learn about, is it traditional Chinese or simplified Chinese, and use the right kind of language characters in your interface. And also you probably should be aware of any dialect if you are targeting regional users. Next thing I want to talk about is holidays. If you work in e-commerce, then you probably cannot miss the really important holidays, such as the Single Days in China, if you are targeting Chinese users. So that is, Single Days 2017 set a world record for the most payment transactions of almost 1.5 billion transactions. So if you work in e-commerce, make sure you know what important sales if you're targeting local users. So Singles Day, Black Friday, Great Singapore Sale, White Valentine's Day are just some of the examples where locals enthusiastically want to shop at these dates. And also keep in mind about the internet speed. So developers, we probably should be aware of it because it actually does also affect how users use a product. For example, in South Korea, they have really great internet, but when you look at countries such as Brazil, Philippines, Venezuela, they probably don't have such a good internet. And like loading and also like how heavy the pages, how heavy the content is, those sort of things can influence how, if today is a good experience or today is a bad experience, if they have really slow internet and nothing on the page is loading, or they use to really a lot of like extra stuff that it shouldn't be loading. And next to internet speed, you also have to consider the screen resolutions. So I use Stat Counter to learn about the different screen resolutions for mobile, web, in various countries. And like using this site because you can filter by region, filter by country, and you can actually get an, I believe, accurate and recent snapshot of what are the screen resolutions of users in that country. And when we talk about like screen resolutions and also internet speed, for developer, we're probably thinking about progressive enhancements or graceful degradation. And this is all to make a product work for the local users, whether they are using old browsers or they are using small phones and slow internet speeds. So those are the ways that I have used to research the culture and also the localization elements. And for people who want to design and develop a global product, I have some tips on world domination, which can help you kind of conquer the challenge of designing for users around the world. The first tip is to have a diverse team. Diverse team is very helpful when you design for users of different cultures because it basically gives you a really close contact which you can ask questions and which can actually bring out different ways of thinking and can show you the insights of different cultures. And this London-based advertising agency who work with clients all around Europe have actually said that having mixed backgrounds is a real asset because they now have different ideas and ideas bounce back differently and they end up making interesting connections. So having a diverse team is also really useful when I worked on localization because we have teams based all over the world. We have developers in Poland, we have teams in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Taiwan, and actually really help us to have interesting perspective when we actually even internally dogfooding the designs. The next tip of world domination is to travel and also do the ethnographic research during your travels. I'm curious to know who traveled from another country to this conference, who traveled to attend here. Quite a lot of people, actually basically, seems like almost every one of you, 70%. So I love travel and also travel, aside from design, travel is my biggest passion. Like I said, I like living in different places and experiencing different cultures. And I find that the best way to learn about culture is to live like a local. And nowadays, it's very easy to do with Airbnb, a lot of like these homestay kind of experiences where there's a local who can show you the country, show you the city, and also explain about how local way of life and way of doing things. You don't even have to actually move there to experience living like a local. You just have to find local people to talk to, ask questions about the local life, ask about what some of the topic they're concerned, and get to know the local community. So when I travel, I tend to like to find local designers to have a chat and understand what are some of the things that's popular here. What's the industry like? What are some of the trends in like the careers, and what's a state of user experience in your country? So traveling and also talking to locals can be really beneficial when you're designing for users of different cultures. According to Momondo, people that travel have a more positive outlook on the country that they just traveled to. They have a more positive view on other cultures in general, and they have a more positive views on differences and also diversity. So travel is a great thing. So great that people have traveled here, and I definitely encourage you to do ethnography research and to research on the local users when you're traveling. And now that we talk a lot about what works for localization and what works for designing for users of different cultures, there's one thing I like to tell you to not do. So just don't do it. There are many bad ideas, but I'll just talk about this one, which is to Google Translate when you're designing localizing interfaces. Google Translate, Bing Translate, or any other sort of machine translation services. If you use Google Translate, perhaps this is one of the things that will work, that will happen. And there's another example, which I think is probably an example that happened in real life, but I hope it actually didn't. So this is a business card of a Dutch company who are going to China to have a business meeting, and with good intention, with best intentions, they translated the business card to handle to their Chinese partners. But they actually, as a Chinese speaker, I can see various mistakes on the name card. So for some reason, when it's translated, the last name is translated to Ko. So Mr. Vish now becomes Mr. Ko. And they're probably like wondering why is the person calling him Mr. Ko, because the translation just went wrong for not sure what reason. And secondly, the telephone number format. So the Dutch telephone number format, it's common to put a space between every two letters, and our country code is 31. However, a Chinese user will probably find it difficult to read the telephone number with a space between every two letters, because Chinese phone numbers are spelled in different ways, and phone numbers in other countries are spelled different ways. So if we're going to so this makes it a bit hard to read, and a better solution is to use the international phone number format with the plus country code and just the rest numbers. And there's also a thing here with the M. So we know that it stands for mobile, but if you're going to give it to a Chinese person and you have to translate the business card, they probably don't know what the M stands for. So instead of putting it here for confusion, you might as well actually just remove it or use an icon that's universally understandable. And lastly, I think you probably cannot see here very well, but in this bottom of the card, it says best from Amsterdam in the English version. But when translated to Chinese, it actually says better be from Amsterdam. Thank you, Val.